The first time I saw her, she was standing in the rain, silent, defiant, and soaked to the bone. I was supposed to be her new mother, but in that moment I felt like I was the one being tested. They said she'd been through too much for her age. They didn't tell me she'd make me question everything I thought I knew about love. Her name was Lila. 16 years old, almond eyes that hid 1,000 storms, and a smile she rarely wore, like it was a privilege she hadn't earned yet. I was Evelyn Hart, 32, a woman with an empty house, a steady job as a social worker, and a heart I had long ago stopped trusting. When the agency called, I said yes without hesitation. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe, and I'd only admit this years later, it was fate. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. Lila barely spoke. She kept her room door half closed, like a fragile truce. Every night, I'd hear the faint creak of her floorboards, her pacing, her insomnia, her ghosts. One evening I left a mug of hot chocolate outside her door. She didn't touch it. The next night I did it again. Third night too. On the fourth, when I came home from work, there was a note beside an empty mug. Thanks. I don't usually like sweet things, but this one was okay. That was how it began, not with tears or hugs, but with cocoa and silence. Over time, our small routines became rituals. Sunday mornings with pancakes. Late-night movies neither of us finished. Quiet drives to nowhere. Lila was a storm in slow motion, one that didn't destroy but rearranged everything in her path. She had this strange mix of vulnerability and defiance. When she laughed, it was rare and raw, like sunlight breaking through clouds. And when she cried, she did it so quietly you almost couldn't tell. She started calling me Eve instead of Miss Hart. The first time she did, I froze. It was just a nickname, but it felt like she had pulled me closer without asking for permission. One night in early spring, the house lost power. The rain came hard, hammering the roof like the sky had something to prove. I lit a few candles and we sat on the floor by the window. Lila wrapped herself in a blanket and looked at me with those dark, endless eyes. "Do you ever get lonely, Eve?" she asked. I hesitated. "Sometimes. But not when you're around." She smiled faintly. "That's kind of sad. And sweet." Her words hung in the air, heavy and soft all at once. I looked away before I could drown in the meaning behind them. The tension was slow, like a melody. You didn't realize you were humming until it took over your thoughts. She started sitting closer on the couch. Her head would rest on my shoulder when she was tired. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me too long, like she was memorizing my face. And sometimes, late at night when I passed her room, I'd hear her whisper my name in her sleep. It terrified me, not because it was wrong, but because it felt right in a way I couldn't admit. The neighbors started talking. People always do when they see something they don't understand. "Too attached," they whispered. "That girl's not really her daughter, you know." I tried to ignore them, but doubt has a way of crawling under your skin. Then one afternoon I found a sketchbook on the kitchen table. Inside, she had drawn me dozens of sketches, some incomplete, some painfully detailed. My smile, my eyes, my hands, and on the last page us, sitting on the couch, her head on my shoulder, a small heart drawn between us. My breath caught. My heart did something I couldn't name. That night I couldn't sleep. Weeks passed, and the air between us became something electric, invisible but alive. One evening we were painting the small fence in the backyard. The sun was setting, orange light dripping over everything like melted gold. She had paint on her cheek, and when I reached out to wipe it away, she caught my wrist. "Eve," she said, voice trembling, "why do you look at me like that?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I had too many. "I'm not," I whispered. "You are." She smiled, eyes glistening. "But it's okay. I like it." Then she let go, but her touch lingered like the warmth of sunlight after dusk. That night I sat awake, questioning everything. What line was I crossing? What kind of love was this? But every time I tried to label it mother, guardian, friend, it slipped through my fingers. It wasn't about roles anymore. It was about connection. Two broken souls who found home in each other's silence. The first time she hugged me, it wasn't planned. She'd had a nightmare, came running into my room, shaking. I held her tight, whispering, "You're safe, you're safe." She clung to me like she was drowning, her tears soaking my shirt. And for the first time in years, I felt needed, not out of duty but out of love. When she finally looked up, our faces were inches apart. I could feel her breath on my lips, trembling, unsure. She pulled away first. "Sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," I said softly. And I meant it. But love, when it's forbidden, doesn't bloom quietly. Breaks rules just by existing. I didn't know then how much the world would test us. How much we'd have to hide. But in that moment, in the flickering candlelight of a home that finally felt alive, all I knew was this. Some loves don't need permission. They just need courage. The days grew longer, but the space between us seemed to shrink. Sometimes when Lila laughed, I'd forget who we were supposed to be. It wasn't a maternal thing anymore, it was something softer, hungrier, more fragile. And I hated myself for it. One night, I came home late from a case meeting. The house was quiet, lights dimmed. I found Lila in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of my oversized sweaters. She was making tea, humming under her breath an old tune I used to play on vinyl. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. "You're home." 2 words. Ordinary, simple. But to someone who'd never really had a home, it meant everything. "Yeah," I said, smiling tiredly. "You should be asleep." "Couldn't," she murmured, turning back to the kettle. "It's weird when you're not here. The house feels too quiet." My chest tightened. I wanted to say me too. Instead, I took the mug from her hand, letting our fingers brush an accidental touch that felt anything but accidental. She looked up, and for a moment the air stood still. That night I dreamt of her. Not as the lost girl I took in, but as the woman she was becoming. I woke up before dawn, shaken not by guilt, but by the terrifying truth that I didn't want to stop feeling this way. I tried to distance myself. More work hours. Fewer shared meals. A wall built out of duty and fear. But Lila noticed. Of course she did. One evening, she confronted me in the living room, her voice trembling. "You've been avoiding me," she said. "No, don't lie to me, Eve." Her voice cracked. Did I do something wrong? Her eyes were wide, desperate, and full of a pain I didn't know how to ease. "No, sweetheart," I whispered. "You didn't. It's me. It's complicated." She stepped closer. "Then make it simple." I couldn't. So I did what cowards do. I looked away. Weeks passed like ghosts through the house. The laughter was gone. Even the silence felt colder. One Saturday morning I found her outside on the porch, painting again. She was barefoot, her hair tied up messily, her face streaked with color. There was something wild and beautiful about her, like the world couldn't quite contain her. When she saw me, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I painted us," she said quietly. On the canvas was a small 2-story house under a glowing sky. 2 figures stood at the door, one tall, one smaller, holding hands, faceless but familiar. "It's what I wish we were," she murmured. "Lila." "I know," she interrupted. "You don't have to say it. I just wanted you to see." And then she walked away. That night I sat in the dark with a glass of wine, staring at that painting. It felt like she had cracked something open inside me, a truth I had buried under the weight of rules and names. What is love, anyway? A title? A boundary? A contract signed by society? Or is it the way someone's voice can quiet your chaos? How their presence fills the silence? How their absence makes everything meaningless? By the time I realized what my heart already knew, it was too late. Because Lila was gone. She left a note. "Eve, I'm sorry. I need to figure out who I am away from all this. You gave me more than anyone ever has. But I can't stay here and keep pretending I'm just your daughter. I love you too much to stay silent. I'll come back when I can breathe again." The world went quiet. I searched for her everywhere, called friends, foster networks, even the old art teacher she adored. No one knew where she'd gone. Days turned to weeks. Then months. I kept the lights on at night just in case. I left her favorite blanket folded on the couch, her mug on the shelf. It was pathetic, maybe. But hope has a cruel way of surviving even when reason dies. The seasons changed. Spring came and went. The house stayed the same except for me. I learned to move through the motions again, but nothing felt whole. Every time I drove past the high school she used to attend, I slowed down. Every time I saw a girl with dark hair and tired eyes, my heart stopped. One evening, almost a year later, I was walking home from work when I saw her. She was standing by the bookstore across the street, wearing a long beige coat, hair shorter now, eyes softer but sadder. For a moment, I thought I was imagining her. Then she smiled. And I forgot how to breathe. When she crossed the street, it felt like time folded in half, the before and the after finally touching. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I whispered back. "You came back. I told you I would." We stood there, awkward and trembling, two ghosts trying to remember how to be real. "You look," I started. "Older," she teased. "Beautiful," I said before I could stop myself. She blushed, eyes darting away. "You haven't changed at all." "Oh, I have," I murmured. "You just don't know how much." We went to a small diner nearby, the kind with flickering neon signs and bad coffee. She told me about her time away, how she'd stayed in a small coastal town, sold her paintings at local fairs, tried to build a life that didn't orbit around me. "It didn't work," she admitted with a nervous laugh. "I kept painting you." I looked down, my throat tightening. "Lila, don't," she said softly. "Please don't say it was wrong. I've heard that word my whole life." Her hand brushed mine across the table. "You made me feel seen, loved, safe. That can't be wrong." Tears burned behind my eyes. "It's not wrong," I whispered. "It's just complicated." "Then let's stop making it complicated," she said. Her voice trembled, but her gaze didn't waver. That night, I drove her home to our home, though neither of us dared say it aloud. When we stepped inside, everything felt the same and completely different. The house smelled like her again, rain and paint and warmth. She walked to the couch, tracing her fingers over the worn fabric. "You kept everything." "I couldn't let go," I said quietly. She turned to me, then really looked at me and smiled through her tears. "I missed you, Eve." "I missed you too, sweetheart." When she hugged me, it wasn't like before. It wasn't comfort, it was confession. Her body fit against mine like a memory I'd been reliving for too long. I wanted to pull away. I didn't. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. She was in the kitchen again, humming that same old tune, wearing my sweater. It felt like nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Over breakfast, she told me she'd enrolled in a local art program. "I want to stay for a while," she said. "If that's okay." "Of course," I said too quickly. She smiled. "Good. Because I wasn't really asking." Her laugh filled the room, and I realized I had missed that sound more than air itself. Days turned into weeks again, this time warmer. We fell back into rhythm, cooking together, talking late into the night, sharing stories in silence. But now the air between us buzzed with an honesty we couldn't ignore. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she spoke softly. "Eve, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever wish you'd never taken me in?" The question pierced through me. "Never," I said immediately. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." She looked down, smiling through tears. "Even if I ruined the rules?" "Especially then." Her laughter cracked into a sob, and before I could say another word, she leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder the way she used to. "I don't want to lose you again," she whispered. "You won't," I said, brushing her hair from her face. "Promise." "I promise." And for the first time, I wasn't lying. That night, when the rain returned, I stood by the window and watched it fall, thinking of how it had all started, a drenched girl with too many scars and a woman who thought she'd forgotten how to love. Now, here we were, two imperfect people learning that love doesn't always ask for permission, just asks to be felt. For a while it almost felt normal. We lived like two quiet shadows sharing the same heartbeat. Mornings with coffee and laughter, nights with old movies and soft music. Sometimes she'd fall asleep with her head in my lap while I ran my fingers through her hair, a habit I never unlearned, even when it should have scared me. But peace never lasts long when the world's watching. It started with Mrs. Delaney, our neighbor, the kind of woman who collected gossip the way others collected porcelain dolls. She saw Lila and me through the kitchen window one evening, dancing barefoot to an old jazz record. Lila's laughter echoed through the night, and my hands were on her waist as she spun. By morning, the whispers had already started. "They're too close. She's not even her real mother. It's inappropriate." It didn't take long for the rumors to reach my workplace. My supervisor, Angela, called me in for a routine check-in. She was kind, but her eyes were sharp. "There's been some concern," she began, folding her hands on the desk, "about your relationship with Lila." My heart sank. She's 18 now, I said quickly. And she's attending college here. She needed a place to stay. Angela nodded slowly. I understand. But perception matters, Evelyn. Especially for someone in your position. The words felt like a verdict. When I got home that night, Lila was painting in the living room. The soft scent of turpentine filled the air, blending with the faint smell of rain from outside. She looked up and smiled. Hey, you look tired. I'm fine, I said. I wasn't. Work stuff. Something like that. She studied me for a long moment, then wiped her hands on a rag and came closer. You're lying again, she said softly. I can tell when you do that. I sighed, sitting down. People are talking. About us. Yes. Her jaw tightened. Let them. It's not that simple. It is to me, she said. I love you, Eve. I don't care what they say. Her voice was steady, brave, the kind of truth that could break or save you. I looked at her, at those eyes that had once held only fear but now shone with fire. You shouldn't have to defend me, I whispered. Maybe not, she said, reaching for my hand. But I will anyway. From that day on, something shifted. We became more careful, no more open laughter in the yard. No more dancing with the curtains drawn back. But even as we hid, our connection only grew stronger. Late at night, we'd talk in whispers, the glow of her small desk lamp painting gold across her face. She'd tell me about her dreams, galleries, cities, a life beyond this small town. And always at the end of every story she'd say, I just want you there. Sometimes she'd sketch while I read. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and find her sitting by the window watching the moon. What are you thinking? I'd ask. She'd smile faintly. That I wish the world wasn't so afraid of love. The tension reached a breaking point one afternoon when I received an unexpected visit. A representative from Child and Family Services stood on my porch, clipboard in hand, polite but cold. Ms. Hart, we received an anonymous report about your living situation with Lila Weston. The words hit like thunder. He asked questions too many. How long Lila had been staying with me. Whether she paid rent. Whether there was physical affection beyond appropriate bounds. I wanted to scream. Instead, I answered every question with measured calm. But my voice shook when I said, You don't get to define what love looks like in this house. When he left, I felt hollow. Lila found me sitting on the steps, staring at nothing. What happened? She asked. They're investigating, I said quietly. Someone filed a report. Her face went pale. Oh my God. Eve, it's okay, I lied again. I'll handle it. No, she said firmly, tears glistening. I'm not letting them take this from us. For the first time, I saw anger in her, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that protects. That night, she packed her things. Where are you going? I asked, panic rising. I'm moving into the art dorms, she said, forcing a smile. Just until this blows over. If I stay, they'll think the worst. I grabbed her wrist. You don't have to. I do. Her voice cracked. If they take your job because of me, I'll never forgive myself. I wanted to argue, to tell her that my world didn't make sense without her in it. But she was right. So I let her go. And just like that, the house went quiet again. Weeks turned into silence. She texted sometimes, small things. Had my first art critique today. Miss your cooking. Saw a storm tonight. Thought of you. I answered every message, but I could feel the distance growing. Then one night my phone rang. Eve. Her voice trembled. Can you come get me? She was crying. I didn't ask questions. I just drove. When I reached the campus, she was sitting on the curb outside the dorms, knees drawn to her chest. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. What happened? I asked, kneeling beside her. Someone found my sketchbook, she whispered. They passed it around. There were drawings of you, of us. They said things. Called me names. I can't stay here. My chest burned. Get in the car, I said. That night I brought her home. The moment she stepped inside, she broke down completely, years of strength collapsing in my arms. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Don't apologize, I whispered, holding her close. You did nothing wrong. I just wanted to love you, she said through her tears. I froze because hearing it aloud, in that broken, desperate voice, shattered whatever wall I had left. I know, I whispered. And maybe I've been pretending I didn't feel the same. Her sobs quieted. She looked up at me, eyes wide, vulnerable. Then don't pretend anymore. And I didn't. What happened next wasn't planned, it wasn't reckless or wild. It was gentle. Honest. The kind of love born not from impulse but from years of quiet yearning. We stayed up all night, talking, crying, laughing in disbelief at how simple it all felt when we finally stopped fighting it. In the morning, sunlight spilled over us like forgiveness. Lila stirred beside me, her voice soft. Do you regret it? No, I said. Do you? She shook her head, smiling through sleep. Then let's stop hiding. But the world doesn't forgive so easily. A week later, a letter arrived from the agency, a formal notice of termination. I sat on the porch, letter trembling in my hands. I'd lost my job, my reputation, everything I had built. When Lila found me, I couldn't even look at her. This is my fault, she whispered. No, I said. This is love's fault. It never fits the boxes people try to build for it. She took the letter from my hands, tore it in half and kissed my forehead. Then we'll build our own box. We decided to leave. There was nothing left for us in that town but judgment and half-truths. Within a month we packed the house, the old couch, the paintings, the chipped mugs that somehow felt sacred now. On our last night there, we sat on the porch as the fireflies came out, listening to the hum of summer. Do you ever think we'll be accepted? Lila asked. I smiled sadly. Maybe not everywhere. But somewhere. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Then let's go find that somewhere. We drove for days through open highways, small towns, endless skies. Sometimes she'd sing softly to the radio. Sometimes we'd ride in silence, holding hands over the gearshift. In the middle of nowhere, we stopped at a roadside motel. Faded walls, neon lights, a broken vending machine humming in the corner. That night, I watched her paint by the window, using a travel easel we'd bought from a thrift store. What are you painting? I asked. Us, she said with a smile. But this time we're not standing at the door. We're walking away from it. I watched her for a long moment, realizing she wasn't the lost girl I'd met years ago. She was a woman now, brave, imperfect, radiant. And somehow she still looked at me like I was her home. By the time we reached the coast, it was dawn. The ocean stretched before us, endless and wild just like her. We rented a small cottage near the cliffs. Nothing fancy, peeling paint, a creaky porch, a leaky faucet. But it was ours. She turned to me that morning, her eyes full of light. We made it, she said. Yeah, I whispered, kissing her hair. We did. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running. Some nights we still talked about the past, the rain-soaked day she arrived, the painting on the porch, the silence that almost broke us. But mostly we talked about the future. She wanted to open an art studio. I wanted to start writing again, maybe even a book about her, about us, about the kind of love that survives everything but shame. And whenever doubt crept in, she'd take my hand and say, You gave me a home. Let me give you the rest of the world. And I believed her. For the first time, love didn't feel like rebellion. Felt like peace. It wasn't perfect, love never is, but it was real. And sometimes when we stood on the cliff watching the waves crash below, I'd whisper, Do you still think I look at you the wrong way? She'd laugh and say, No, Eve. You look at me like I'm exactly where I belong. And maybe she was right. Maybe after everything, after the storms, the whispers, the tears, we had found the one thing everyone spends their whole life searching for. Home. The sea became our clock. Mornings began with the cry of gulls and the crash of waves against the rocks. And nights ended with the wind whispering through cracked shutters. It wasn't luxury, but it was freedom. The cottage was small, a single bedroom, paint peeling on the walls, floors that creaked under every step. But the view from the porch made it all worth it. The horizon stretched wide, blue and endless, a place where the sky and the ocean kissed like they'd waited forever to find each other. That's how I saw us. Two souls that had wandered too long, finally finding where they belonged. Lila started painting again like she was born to. She'd sit outside for hours with her easel, hair tangled in the wind, sunlight turning her skin golden. Sometimes I'd bring her lemonade and watch from the doorway. She always looked so alive when she painted, as if every brushstroke was a heartbeat. What are you working on today? I'd ask. She'd glance back with a grin. Something you'll probably cry over later. And she was always right. Her art had changed. There was peace in her colors now, the deep blues of trust, the soft pinks of tenderness, the golds of hope. The anger was gone. The sadness too. All that remained was love. I started writing again. It began as a journal, small notes, memories, things I was afraid to lose. But the more I wrote, the more it turned into something bigger. It became our story. Not the scandal the world imagined, but the truth. A story about two people who found each other in the wreckage, who taught each other that love in any form could still be pure, still be kind, still be real. I didn't write to justify us. I wrote to remember that we existed. Sometimes we'd drive down to the small coastal town nearby, buy groceries, visit the bookstore, sit by the pier and eat ice cream like tourists. People stared at first, of course. Small towns always do. But we didn't hide anymore. She'd hold my hand in public, her fingers brushing mine with quiet confidence. It was such a simple thing, but after years of fear, it felt revolutionary. One afternoon, as we walked through the market, an older woman selling flowers smiled at us. "You two make a beautiful pair," she said. I froze, expecting judgment. But her smile was genuine, soft, knowing. "Thank you," Lila replied before I could speak. "We think so too." The woman handed her a white daisy for free. "For love," she said. "The kind that lasts." That night, Lila pressed the daisy between the pages of my notebook. "Proof," she whispered, "that the world isn't all cruel." Months passed. Then a year. We built a life quiet, imperfect, full of small joys. Lila's art began gaining attention. She held her first solo exhibition in the nearby town. I watched her stand in the center of the small gallery, surrounded by her paintings, glowing with a confidence I'd never seen before. People admired her work, called it honest, haunting, human. One critic asked, "What inspires you the most?" She smiled, eyes meeting mine across the room. "Home," she said simply. Later that night, as we walked along the beach barefoot, she whispered, "You're my home, Eve. You always were." And I believed her. Of course, there were still hard days. Sometimes the past crept back, guilt, doubt, the echoes of what we'd lost. Once I woke to find Lila sitting outside, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the waves. "Can't sleep?" I asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She shook her head. "I had a dream about the old house. About the first night you took me in." I smiled faintly. "You hated me then." "I didn't," she said softly. "I was just scared of needing you too much." She looked at me then, eyes shining in the moonlight. "Do you ever wish it had been different?" "No," I said. "Because every version of my life without you is worse." She leaned into me, and we stayed there, two silhouettes against an endless sky, learning that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the choice to stay anyway. A year later, I published the book. It was called The Sea Between Us. I used my middle name as a pseudonym, but anyone who really knew us would understand. The final line read, "Love doesn't ask who you're supposed to be. It only asks that you stay." The book didn't make me famous, but it found readers, quiet ones, hidden ones, people who wrote to say that it made them feel less alone. That was enough. Lila's next collection was titled Homecoming. One painting from that series became her most talked about work, a woman standing by the sea, facing the horizon, another woman's hand resting gently on her back. Their faces were turned away, but the tenderness between them was undeniable. When an interviewer asked her about it, she smiled. "It's not about labels," she said. "It's about finding someone who sees you, even when you don't see yourself." Afterward, she came home and found me crying quietly over the article. "Hey," she teased, wiping my tears with paint-stained fingers. "You're supposed to be the writer, not the dramatic one." I laughed through my tears. Too late. Our love grew older, softer, wiser. We planted flowers outside the cottage, lavender, daisies, roses. She said she wanted color even in the rain. Every spring we'd repaint the walls together, laughing as we splattered paint everywhere. Every Christmas we'd drive into town, buy the cheapest decorations we could find, and turn our little home into something that sparkled. And every night, no matter how ordinary, we ended the day the same way, with her head on my chest, my hand in her hair, and the sea whispering just beyond our window. 5 years passed like that. Then one morning I woke to find a letter on my nightstand. It was from the agency. They had reinstated my social work license. Someone from the old department had read my book and petitioned for my reinstatement, citing the profound empathy and truth in my writing. I laughed through tears as I showed Lila. "Looks like they finally caught up," she said. "What should I do?" "Whatever you want. You don't owe them anything." I thought for a moment. Then I smiled. "Maybe I'll start again, help kids like you once were." She kissed my cheek. "Then I'll paint their stories." And somehow that felt right. One evening years later, we sat on the beach as the sun set our ritual. The horizon burned orange, melting into gold, and I realized how time had softened everything. The fear, the shame, even the old scars all faded beneath the gentle rhythm of our life. "I used to think love was something you had to earn," Lila said quietly. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I think love is what happens when you stop running from yourself." I reached for her hand, threading my fingers through hers. "You're wise for someone who still forgets where she puts her keys." She laughed, that same bright, unguarded laugh that had once started everything. As night fell, we lay on the sand side by side, the stars stretching above us like a promise. "Do you ever think people will understand us?" she asked. I turned to her. "I don't think they have to." She nodded. "Good. Because I don't want to explain us anymore." "You never had to," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We were never a story for them. We were a story for us." She smiled, eyes shimmering. "Then let's keep writing it." Years later, when I'd grown gray and she still looked like sunlight in human form, I often thought back to that first day, the rain, the silence, the girl who had walked into my life and rearranged it forever. Sometimes she'd catch me staring and laugh. "What?" "Just remembering," I'd say. "What we were." "No," I'd answer softly. "What we became." On our 10th anniversary at the sea, she surprised me with a painting, her biggest one yet. It showed our cottage bathed in morning light. 2 figures sat on the porch, hand in hand, watching the ocean. Above them, written faintly in white paint, were the words, "We made it home." I couldn't speak. I just kissed her and whispered, "Yes, we did." The world never came knocking again. No headlines, no whispers, no eyes full of judgment. Just the wind, the sea, and 2 women who had once been strangers, now forever bound by the kind of love that doesn't fade. And in the quiet of that small house by the ocean, surrounded by her paintings and my words, I realized something simple, something true. We weren't a scandal. We were a miracle. Years later, when my hands had grown too weak to write and her eyesight had started to blur, we sat on that same porch, the sunset painting our world gold one last time. "Promise me," she whispered, voice trembling, "that you'll remember us." I smiled faintly. "I wrote it all down, didn't I?" She laughed softly. "Yeah, you did. Then we'll never be forgotten." And when the day came when the sea took its breath and the world fell silent, I knew we had lived exactly the life we were meant to. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And in the last pages of the story, our story, I wrote the only ending that ever felt true. She came into my life asking for a mother. I gave her a home. She gave me everything else. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.